What you guys, got another video here for you. This is another PC build. This one is a pretty budget build, but it's a very good build for gamers or anyone who wants to get into PC gaming. So these are the parts that we are using in this build. We got a B450 Tomahawk Max. Now this is a Ryzen 3000 desktop ready, which means it will take the latest Ryzen processors if you want to use one of those. I've chose to use the Ryzen 5 2600. It's around about £109 in the UK, which makes it a very affordable processor. It's got 6 cores and 12 threads, which is plenty for most people's needs. Now I've gone with the Corsair RAM here, which is the Vengeance Pro RAM, which is RGB, and it's 16 gigs at 3200 megahertz. Now we're going to install the CPU. Now you can see here there's this retention lever. Lift this up. There's no pins on the board, they're actually on the chip on AMD. So we're going to get this out the box and get it installed. Should be in this little clamshell here. Just remove it and we'll get it installed into the board. Pretty straightforward stuff. Now if you've never built a PC before, it's pretty straightforward. Just follow along and you should have great success at building your first PC. Now the good thing about this CPU, it does come with its own cooler, which is an added bonus because it means that you don't have to then buy a cooler, which is great for budget builders. See, it's got its own compound already on the cooler as well, and this cooler's okay for what it needs to do. Temp should be pretty fine once we get this installed. Now if you're looking at the CPU here, you'll see that there's a little triangle in the corner here. This just has to marry up with the marker on the board, which is in the bottom left hand corner. This will all be in your user manual if you're not so familiar with it, but basically just follow along there and slot it in. Now once you get it into there, just be very careful of the pins on the CPU, give it a little wiggle and pull the retention lever down and the jobs are good. And so let's move on to the next stage, which is installing our drive for our Windows operating system. I'm using the XPG SX8200 Pro. Now this is from ADATA. It's an NVMe drive, 1TB, super fast and super affordable, so that's why we're going to be using it in this build. So there's a little screw that comes in the motherboard kit. I just need to move the screw on the board over to this port here, and that should be good enough for us to then be able to install our drive. So let me just unscrew here and screw it into this location here. And once we get this screw down, we'll be able to offer up our drive. Now this drive does come with its own little heatsink as well, so I'm going to be putting that on in a second. So you can see here there's a little screw clip here, and there's also a little notch here which goes into the board. You just slot that in here. Now you can get the SSD ones. This is the NVMe type drive, which makes it super fast, and I've gone for the 1TB, which means I'm not going to be having any storage on here because this PC will be sold as soon as I've built it. Now like I said, it does come with its own little heatsink with a sticky pad on the bottom, so I'm just going to remove that tape there and just stick it on top of the drive, and that should keep it a little bit cooler. So I'm going to put that on there, just line it up. Now you can do this before you install it, it's entirely up to you, it really don't matter. So I'm just going to push that down and that's ready to go. Now I've just got to put the screw in to lock that into position. So the tools you're going to need to build a PC is just a Phillips screwdriver like this, just a standard Phillips screwdriver, and of course I've got a little screwdriver set as well, which I use for the little tiny screws. Now I also use a little ratchet set for the standoffs for the case, just in case I need to add some more in, and this is a screwdriver set I'm using here. And that's pretty much it. You don't really need much more than that really. Some people like to use electric screwdriver, and that's fine. If you're doing high volumes of computers, you might want to use electric screwdriver. But for this little build, I'm just going to be using these. Now be careful here not to cross thread this little screw, because it's so tiny, it's easy to cross thread these, so just take your time. And this is a great little screwdriver set here. It's got a little rotating top here, which means you can just spin it with your fingers, which makes screwing in these screws a lot easier. So let's go ahead. I'll leave all the links for that stuff in the video description if you're interested. But this is the screwdriver set here. It's got a bunch of different bits on here, all magnetic. Great little screwdriver set, and it's not that expensive. Made of metal, good quality from TechLife. So we're going to go ahead and continue with the build. So we've got our drive in, so we need to put our cooler on and our RAM, and that's what we're going to do next. So before we put the cooler on, we need to remove the bracket, and the bracket is because this is for another type of cooler. So I'm just going to remove these, and this one doesn't have this mechanism. It has the little screws that you screw into the back plate, so I just need to remove those. Now you want to keep those in the motherboard box just in case you sell the motherboard. That means that it makes it easier to sell when you've got all the bits with it. So try and keep that in one place. So I'm just going to remove these, and these are just using the standard Phillips screwdriver. That's now removed. Leave the back plate on there. If you lift the motherboard up now, the back plate will fall off, so just leave it on a nice solid surface that you see here. And basically what we need to do is screw down the cooler. Now there's a little notch on there that says AMD. You see that with the logo there? Now that should be either on the right or the left. There's good clearance here, but the RAM I'm using is high profile RAM, which means it's going to approach on that little fourth slot there. Now when you're screwing these down, do them diagonally like this. Just push them down and do diagonally, otherwise you're going to run into problems. Make sure you don't go all the way down on the screw straight away, and just screw them down lightly and then keep going round diagonally like that. Now I've tied the cable off here a little bit because it's just too much, and then I'm just going to put that into the right header on the board. It should say CPU, and there's another one sometimes on these boards that says CPU pump, but you don't want to be putting it on that one. So just put it on the CPU one there, and that should be good. Just going to nip that off like so. Just nip that off. You can use a little pair of nail scissors or clippers, whatever you've got to hand. It still does the same job really. So that's what I'm just doing there, and I've just cable tied this off. You can get these cable ties. They normally give you a few cable ties, but always have those lying around. So let's go ahead and get our RAM in the board. So the build's coming along pretty nicely. Now normally on the board that they will have DIMM 1, DIMM 2, DIMM 3, DIMM 4. If you're not familiar and it hasn't marked it up and you're not familiar with it, just check your motherboard user manual, and that will tell you exactly which ones to populate for how many sticks of RAM that you're using. So we're using 2 sticks here, so we're going to be populating the 1 and 3 DIMM slots on the board. So I'm just going to pull these little levers down here. Now sometimes I only have like one lever and the other one's molded, so just don't go forcing it because you will snap it. So let me just show you the things to look out for when you're buying this type of high profile memory. If I try to put that in the 4th slot here, you'll see that big plastic AMD logo thing sticking out there, and it's starting to go over the slot or near the slot, 4th slot. So if you've got 4 sticks, you see that little notch that needs to marry up on the board with the notch on the board, and then slot in. Now if I was populating all 4 of these, you're probably going to run into trouble here, as I'm showing you. It will be very difficult to get that RAM in there with that there, and you will have to rotate this round the other way to do that if you wanted to populate all 4 slots. So these are the things you just have to look out for. It's no big deal, but it will work with the 1 and 3 slots, but the 4th slot will be a bit of a pinch to get that in there with this high profile memory. So I'll move that around another time, but I'm just going to populate this 3rd slot here with the RAM, and we'll move on to the 1st slot afterwards. So you can see how high that memory is. It's quite high memory. So I'm just going to marry this little slot up to the board again and just slot that in, and we're good to go there. So what I'm going to do here now is just remove the thumb screws from the glass, and then we can get into the case and start putting all our hardware inside. So let's go ahead and get this all ready. Now this case is from Aerocool. It's called the Cylon Pro tempered glass case. It's around about £50 in the UK, and to be honest, it's one of the best £50 cases that I've actually built a PC in. It really is good. It's got some really premium features in here. We need to put in the IO shield next, so I'll go ahead and do that. This just pushes in the top left hand corner. Make sure you've got the audio bits at the bottom here, and push that in. It's pretty straightforward. Now this case does come with its own power supply shroud. It's all blacked out inside. We will need to put in a couple of little motherboard risers here, which do come in the screw kit, but you can have radiator up the top here, 240mm rad up the top. It does come with magnetic filters on here as well, and no RGB fans in here, but you can add those in, as I will do a little bit later on in the video. but it does have some good cool cable management features on here as well. Got my little magnetic tray here to hold all the screws. I'm just going to finger tight these motherboard riser screws or motherboard standoffs, or whatever you want to call them. You can call them what you like, but basically just rise the board off of the chassis of the case to make sure it's not grounding out. Now I use this little ratchet set here. It's a mini ratchet set which screws those down, and just hold on to the heatsink here and just slot that into position. A little angle that you need to slot it in, and then you can screw these down with the screws that comes in the kit. Pretty simple stuff. Now if you want to use one of those electric screwdrivers, you can do. If you want to give your arm a little bit of a workout, then use a hand screwdriver, but the electric screwdrivers are going to be screwing in something small like this, so make sure the electric screwdriver does have a clutch system on it, and make sure you get that set to the right setting, otherwise you're going to start stripping and shredding screws and also possibly damage hardware inside your PC, so be very careful if you're using that. So now we're moving on to the Bitfenix power supply. This is the formula power supply. Now as you can see here, this is a non-modular power supply. It means you're going to have a wad of cables here, and this was sent over by Bitfenix, so I wanted to use it in this build, so a big thank you to Bitfenix for supporting the build. Now normally I like to work with modular power supplies because it just makes cable management and makes the job a little bit easier, but if you're on a tight budget, then going for something like this is not a deal breaker. You just have to know how to cable manage properly and how to get it all set out right. So undo all the cables and get them separated into what you're going to be using in the build. Now unfortunately there's going to be a lot of cables here that you're not going to use, and they are going to be molded to the actual power supply, which means you're going to have to hide them somewhere, and I'll show you the best way I'm going to be doing it. So let me just screw these screws in. There's 4 screws in the power supply, and this is pretty self-explanatory stuff. People overcomplicate this, but it's not that difficult. Just put the screws in the right holes here for where the screw threads are on the back of the power supply, and they're normally in the same position for most power supplies, so just go ahead and screw those in. So let's move on to this side here where we can do a bit of cable management and run some cables up. Now this case here, the Aerocool Cylon Pro, this was sent over by Aerocool, so a big thanks to those for contributing to the build. Sorry that it didn't get done sooner, it's just that you sent this over at a time when I've already finished the build, so I had to put this back to the next build, which was quite a hefty delay, so my apologies for that. But as you can see here, this is the case, and to be honest, it's a pretty decent case. It's one of the best budget cases that I've built in. It's got plenty of room down here, and this is how I like to do my cable management for non-modular power supplies, which means you've got a big load of cables here. The good thing about this case, the caddy for the drives here is moved right away over here, which gives you a bit more room here, and this formula power supply has worked out perfectly because it's a little bit shorter than the longer power supplies, and this is a 750 watt gold plus rating power supply, which means it's a very good power supply. So you can see here, because it's shorter, it gives me a bit more room here to cable manage and tuck these in. Now I'll cable tie them up on the ones that I'm not going to be using, and then fold them back and tuck them into the little hole here, which keeps them nice and tidy. The good thing about the CPU cable here is it routes up this hop and then plugs into the board, and the good thing is it's got some little clips on the back of the case here, which allows nice cable management. Got the 24 pin poked through here, which you can't see a lot of because it's got that nice little channel in there for cable management, which is another plus sign for this case. So I'm just going to bend this over and plug this into the board. Now once we get this in, we're getting towards the end of the build. I need to start putting some fans in, and of course the graphics card, and that's pretty much it. So we'll do some benchmarks and some gameplay just to test it and see what it goes like. So let's go ahead and finish this off. So you can see here, this is tucked away nicely. So let's go ahead and get the graphics card installed. Now I'd say one little negative for this case is these expansion slots. You have to break these off, which is 2019. These should be just resting in here, but I think if you kept them without bending them, that little cradle thing there should hold them in when you screw it down. So the graphics card we've gone for is the RX 590. Now these are very affordable. You've got the RX 570, the RX 580 and the RX 590, which is a great card if you want to get into PC gaming. You get good frame rates. I'll show you the frame rates that you can get with games a little bit later on in the video, but we're going to get this plugged in and we need to give it a bit of power. I've got to screw that in and we're good to go there. So I'll need to route the cable through the bottom here and plug that into the graphics card. Now this does recommend 550 watts, so you will need to get yourself a 550 watt upwards power supply. This is a 750 watt gold rated power supply and it's good enough for what we need here. So we've got plenty of power in reserve, which means the power supply is not working as hard. So we're going to tidy this cable up here with a little cable tie just to make it look as neat as possible, and we're going to snip that little excess cable tie off here, and that's as good as you're going to get that. There's not a lot you can do there. Now we need to plug in all the cables from the case to the motherboard, which is your power LED and also your power switch, your reset switch, and loads of other bits and pieces that you just need to plug in there. I couldn't get the camera to show that bit because my hand's in the way, but it's in the manual. It's very straightforward and easy to do. You can see power LED, power switch, hard drive, and that's your reset switch, and it just goes in that method there. Very simple and easy to do. So what we're going to do here is remove the stock fan and put in some RGB fans, and these are addressable RGB fans which were sent over by BitPhoenix. So a big thanks to BitPhoenix for contributing to this build. It just makes it a lot easier for me to show you content if people help contribute to the build like this, and of course BitPhoenix have been a big supporter of my channel for 2 builds now, so thanks very much BitPhoenix. So we're just going to go ahead and use the addressable RGB fans here and put them in here. I'm going to put one exhaust fan at the back here, and I'm going to put 2 up the top as well, which are going to be used as exhaust as well. So let's go ahead and get these in. You can see the little arrows on here. It tells you the direction of the wind where it's going to be blowing through. It's normally this little bracket brace on the back here where the air will come out, and it's the same on every single fan that you can buy on the market. So we're going to just screw these in. Now these do come with their own screws, and again these are addressable RGB fans, which means they will sync using the Aura Sync feature, and you can plug these straight to the board and you should be good to go and choose whatever colour you like. Now this is where we're going to be putting 2 more fans, but if you had a radiator here, well, this will take a 240mm rad, no problems. But because this is a cheaper budget build, we're not going to be using a closed loop wall cooled system on here. We're leaving the stock fan on the 2600. But if you want to add a bit of bling, which does help sell the PC, we're just going to be using these as extraction, and of course you've got these cables here. I'll poke these through the hole and we will then screw them down. It's that simple. And this will now give us some exhaust at the back and at the top. Now some people may say this is too many fans, and it's not. It's perfectly good for cooling and heat rises, and this will suck all the hot air out of inside the case, which will give you nice thermals inside your case, which will help keep everything running nice and cool. So I'm going to put that filter back on. Now we'll add 2 more fans in the front, and these are going to be intake fans, and I'm just going to put normal airflow fans inside here. I'm using one from the back which I removed, and I also got another one here which is 120mm as well, and I want to add 2 more in the front just to get some air from the room and suck it into the case to help cool the system down. And this is basically the end result of it all. I've got the duct in here with all the cabling going down, and of course down the bottom you can see I've tucked these away here so you can't see them, and that's about as good as you're going to get it with a non-modular power supply. Got my fan controllers here. This is all set out, and this was sent over by BitPhoenix as well, so got this all wired in and it's going to the board, so everything should be good. Just going to slot the back on, and the back slots on very easily, and the reason for that is because that cable management is so easy to deal with that sort of duct in there, and also those clips. It keeps all the cables nice and tight. So I'm just going to quickly screw this down, and there we have the finished look. You can see I've just got 2 fans on the front here, which is going to draw air in, and of course we've got the extraction at the back and at the top, and that should be good enough for what we need for this build. Now okay, you can do away with 1 or 2 fans if you wish, that's entirely up to you, but I decided to go with these setup here, and I've used this setup before and it's been quite successful and the system runs super cool. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this off, put the side glass panel on and remove the plastic covering, and there's one more inside that I need to remove which I forgot to remove, so I'm going to have to unscrew all that and remove it. But this is the end result. Turned out really nice. I've got this all set as red, but you can pretty much do these any colour as you like, because they're RGB. You do have a little button on there which says LED, you can push that and it will change it. You can also use the AuraSync software which installs on your PC. There's a little button inside which I can click on as well if I wanted to change it. You can do whatever you like, make it whatever colour you like. I've gone for red here just because I wanted to tie it all in and use a red theme for this build. I find red seems to sell quite well, and also blue does. But if you want to make it all multicoloured, you can just put that in the description saying you can change that up and make it whatever colour you like. But you can see here red does look really nice, and that's what we're going to be doing for this build. So I'm going to show you some benchmarks here as well, and show you some games that it does run very well indeed. If you're looking to build something like this, then I'll leave all the links in the video description for all the parts that I used for my build. But as you can see here, it looks pretty tidy and it looks quite nice. What would have been the icing on the cake would have been the different style of graphics card, which has the illumination on the side like the LED lights with saying sapphire on it, and I could have had that as red and that would have looked even more better. But at that price I couldn't grumble because I got that at a pretty decent price. So we're going to do some benchmarks here. This is Dirt Rally. You can see the settings I've got here, and you can see the frame rates are pretty high, and I'm just recording the monitor screen here, and you can see getting pretty good frame rates. Now of course you can up the graphics if you wish, it's entirely up to you, but pretty much see you're getting very good frame rates here for anyone who's a gamer. Will be able to play PUBG, you know, Fortnite, any of those games. Your Witcher, I will show you a bit of Witcher, and also Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I'll give you a blast of that just to show you what it's like on benchmark mode, so you can see that it does do a pretty good job. Now with that NVMe drive in there as well, it should be super fast with data transfer as well inside of the machine as well. Just going to quickly do this benchmarks here, leave all these settings as is, what you can see on here, and I'll run it and run the benchmark, and there you go. So you're getting good frame rates for this card and this good CPU. It's a 2600 and that's ample for any sort of gamer. So if you're looking for a cheap budget system and you don't want to spend a lot of money, then the 2600 is still a viable option in 2019. There's no reason to go out and spend extra money on the latest and greatest stuff when you can still do the same thing with a 2600. Now granted, the newer generations of Ryzens are a lot faster than the 2600 and the 2700, but if you're on a tight budget, then something like this is still doable in 2019, and that's what you need to look at. It's all about bang for your buck and how much you've got to spend on a complete system. So we'll just do a bit of The Witcher here, and these are the settings that I use just for this test. And again, you can tweak these. I'm pretty sure that you can turn these up and do a bit more, but I'm just going to run this as is and we'll see what it looks like. And we'll give this one last test. Now I could have done Cinebench, but there's tons of people that have done that on YouTube already. I just wanted to show you what it looks like for gaming, because that's the most thing that people want to see, is gaming results. So, but all in all, I'm pretty impressed with the overall result, and it looks pretty good as well, and all for a pretty affordable price. I'll try and leave the total, how much everything cost, in the video description, because I can't remember off the top of my head, but check the video description and all the notes in there and it will tell you exactly how much all this stuff costs, and there'll be links to all the parts that I used for this build. But other than that, my name has been Brian from briteccomputers.co.uk. Hope you enjoyed this build video. I've got more build videos coming up in the future. I plan to do a few more of these, so stay tuned for those. Hit that subscribe button and I shall see you again for another video real soon. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now. Now if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the red subscribe button and then hit the bell notification button and click all to be notified when we upload new videos.